All right. So we seem to be live. So we're going to test this out. So this March, I'm going to be presenting on cybersecurity, specifically sharing something that's from an observation that I have seen. And it's really the advantage of ignoring the long tail of security, really from a product perspective. Um, I guess if you think about like the last 10, 15 years, I've been in the product space, either creating new products, bringing products to market, supporting people on their products. Had the privilege of working like with this, for instance, like with Cisco, where we had one data center and a cloud product, and then we built it out to being 18 for their global cloud offering. So that was pretty cool, and had a chance to work with Google and Facebook, really kind of getting in the weeds there. Clearly, just one man's perspective on all of this, but my intent and my hope is to share the kind of the practical approach here, such that it can help others with their products. Now, from my perspective, right, I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years and have been, in the networking, hardware, technology space, building things from, really the early 90s. So it gives me an interesting lens into how everything pieces together and build on top of each other, and then kind of the inherent uh, similarities and differences that exist in these environments. So I want to take this time and really share my perspective and observations from practically working in the space, and specifically we're going to hone it down to reflecting on not just what Honeywell does and our 300 plus cloud subscriptions that I have been a part of with our products, but broadly, right? Right. So this is about how do you manage cybersecurity for your products, whether you're a startup or you're serving tens of millions of individuals globally. And I think what's important here is to really think about the method on how you approach it, both in what is practical, and on the second side, what are the impracticals? Like, where are the areas that we might be pulled to look at that aren't really going to apply or give us the greatest benefits. So I really like to kind of talk about kind of like the shiny objects in our field, such that those that are maybe new or just really on a product team and trying to bring something to market to delight their customers and help avoid those things. So I like to, this doesn't mean the shiny objects won't become very important objects for you long term, but it is important to think about these. Sometimes shiny objects kind of fog what we must be doing versus things that we can do, which make us incrementally better. So the things that I focus on are things that are 80 to 90% return for our customers. And when you think about that lens, that really helps you kind of distill down should or should you not pay attention to it. So some of the fun shiny objects, I just want to kind of talk about those. I know there are so many vendors, and some of them are confusing, and some are really good, and you absolutely need their technology, and others are just we're just not there yet. So one favorite is blockchain. That's a shiny object if there ever was one. Technology is super interesting. There's a lot that can be done with it. I think we are certainly at the earliest stages. So if you think about the internet, when we started, we were very straight. Early 90s, there wasn't really of obvious what the internet was a fad, was it going to survive, and kind of went ebbs and flows. We had the dot-com crash, and we kind of gotten better, and the technology's gotten better and kind of built together. But that is really over a multi-decade process. Blockchain is just at the outset. It is just beginning. I'm certain there is a Gartner wave on this one, but from a cybersecurity perspective, it is definitely a shiny object. And if there's things that, if it benefits your business, if you are a blockchain or you're in this field, then maybe it makes sense to pay attention to it. But I think from a broad product perspective, this is one that we avoid. Another one I like to focus on as an avoidance tactic really is deception-based services, right? There is a new kind of wave, and this has been around like for honeypots and honey nets. Those have been around since 2000, but there is a greater intensity around it, and so I label this a shiny object. It is an excellent method when you have everything else in place. It really provides that 2 to 3% return. And the benefit from those types of systems and detection systems, I know there was probably some slicks on this, but from a practical point of view, from a strategy and allocating your budget, it is a shiny object. In order for that to really be a benefit to you, you have to actually have all the other pieces in play. The deceptions systems have to be architected in a way smartly to reflect how your business is, and then you also then need to look at what is what is this information telling me and informing me, so I need to behave accordingly, right? So if I was deploying sensors in let's say an energy sector, and every one of my endpoints had a honeynet or honeypot or some other deception type services in play, am I analyzing that data and then reacting and responding proactively? Or is it really a silent system that's sitting there just running, and we're not using the intelligence and reacting our program accordingly? So if you have the manpower to support it, then it clearly would benefit you. So again, incremental improvement at the highest tier, but only if you have augmented your systems and processes to support it. So with those two highlighted, I want to really kind of get into the meat of it, right? So when we think about what are the practicals, what should we be doing? What are the things that we really need to be focusing on? So there are common controls that we make sure as cybersecurity professionals are in every product and every deployment. Now we all know these, right? You can look at the top 10 on the OWASP, you can look at the top 20 SANs, and if you analyze the breach data, the Verizon Data Breach Report is always very good, and others in the industry provide similar insights. The same vulnerabilities and attack profiles come up every time. I think the top 10 for OWASP, the most common ways of breaching the security, has been the same for like the last 10 years. Yet we have gone from multitude of versions of browsers, scripting technology. It's just an immense amount of progress in what we code, how we deploy, how we use these web browsers. To the point where I'm currently recording this through a browser window, right? 10 years ago, much more difficult, much more, parts playing together. And so really focusing on, at a base level, the top 10, top 20 of those controls, right? Now, how do you frame that in your business? I have seen the best way we frame this when we look at it from a consolidated register of controls and focus. So if you're a Google, or if you are a Facebook or any of these organizations, you can actually pull up and see what certifications and standards and the controls that is on the register and that they are following. And so it's super transparent, right? Are they ISO 27001? All right, that's the management system. Clearly, internally, the culture is behaving, but it is mapped to that. FedRAMP, the controls that list there from the government standards. If you're looking at an industrial company that's digital, such as ours, we focus on industrial standards, and then we apply that into cloud spaces. And we use that as the register in which we look at the lens of our products. Now, when you have that, it doesn't have to be fancy, right? A lot of times you see people, governance, risk, and compliance, We merge together different standards. I'm a big fan of that. I actually helped make one of those, and actually have standing patents about it. But at the day one of your product, find one that fits, that's going to benefit your customers, give them the assurance that they need, give you an accurate and current register. Too often I see organizations when I speak with them that they're basing their work on old standards and aren't just evolving with time, right? So if you look at your program and you've deployed a simple solution around, hey, we create this type of product, and this is the register we're going to use, and these are the controls. But then, what do we go to the cloud? What do we move everything to the cloud? We go, full serverless technology. We need to react to that. And so, from our perspective, what we look at is we have a specific register of controls, and then based off of, is it strictly hardware, is it strictly offline, or is it possible to be connected to the cloud? Now, that last one I think is the most important to share. When you think about the possibility of your product to be digitally connected to the cloud, to Azure, to AWS, whatever, when you think about that and you think about the design stage, once you've made the decision that this might get connected, that is when we add the stricter controls, the register at the higher level, right? So we would, maybe the very beginning, we're less concerned about certain levels of encryption and authentication and integration and OAuth and all those other things. But once you go to the concept of this product might be connected, that is when we get very specific on some of those technology controls. And the reason we do it is we do it at the framework level. So if you have picked a register that fits your business, how do we do this for hundreds of products across the globe? The way we do it, and the way I've seen others successfully do it, is we start at the design stage, where once we've taken that register, determined if it's going to be on the cloud or connected at all, we then apply a certain rigor of controls that we're seeking at the design documentation level, right? So if you imagine, first we're going to come up with an idea, then we're going to design it out, we're going to architect it, and then we're going to do kind of ideation around it, and then start doing newer versions. Cybersecurity and security architects are involved at every single stage. And at the very beginning of that process, in order to really drive at the base code level what we need to meet our market and our customer needs. And what that means is that we use a specific process that orchestrates the entire life cycle of development of a product. It allows us, where we build in the components of, well, how do we do patches? How do we do updates? Are we do over the air, over the wire? Are we mobilizing a truck? All of those things are pre-considered. So for your product security program, you would, number one, document out document out what you need, and then apply that in the how with your development teams, right? So if you need to determine, well, we want to make sure wherever we're deploying it, that we have the ability to do backups, that we're going to do quick deployments, we need incident response, or we need some kind of sensors, or we need to, if you're in Azure, for instance, maybe you have event hubs hooked into the security center. All these different things, these architectural subparts, you need to think of those in advance and then deploy those out through all the stages with your developers. We have seen great success in working with the developers there. Now, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that we can do differently that we really are trying to improve upon. And that's something that we really embrace in our culture. Is it's a lot of the stuff we're inventing, right? Like, our engineers are building things from scratch. Like, they're literally inventing new things. And we can't go in with a simple rule book of do this, do that, you do it this way, right? Every call, every week, come in with something new, a different way to serve the market, to help our customers. And we're reacting. So from a product security perspective, we have to obsess over the basics, the basics, and we have to be very practical. And it's thinking about that situation where the developer wants to implement something and then having the how can we make this work with the register framework that we are looking towards, given the risk of it's connected, it's not connected, and it's straight hardware. So that is how we really flow through those parts. Things that a couple kind of like block and tackle things going from ideation to operational state is that at the very beginning, we do a lot of training with our engineers and we embed a security architect with a product throughout its development stages. And the product security leaders work with those technology groups in order to really understand are we with the cycle? Is a product on hold? Is it going to be merged into another product? How's the interplay going to be? Really seeking out to understand how these parts play, because if you know that, then you're able to really be an advisor and contributor to this process, and not just answering questions of, should we have this security, this encryption or that encryption, right? Like those should already be predefined in what are your reasonable control register, right? So we don't really have conversations on what kind of encryption is allowed or what type of two-factor authentication should we use. That doesn't exist, right? We know the intent and we list what is the I guess the permitted posture today relative to that technology core control. The reason we try to give that freedom is we try to empower through training and kind of passionate few in order to help those products and as they're going through the cycle be the best they can, right? Because we can't all scale to do all the things for all the products, and that's something we all have to be okay with. And so for us, been very fortunate to have a culture of people that lead with the right intent, and when they don't have the answers, they pull down the training, they start self-learning, and they deploy the best version that they can. And we have found more times than not that they have deployed the best version. Maybe we would have done it slightly different, but they've achieved the objective, and that's super important, right? The objective of our profession and our teamwork with these product or organizations and these engineers is to bring delightful products to the market. You cannot be delightful if your product crashes, is unavailable because of attacks, or we expose and put our customers in a pretty negative event because we didn't do the basics, right? Like we didn't take care of cybersecurity, we didn't take care of privacy. So number one, the intent on running the culture. Another one that has been pretty powerful is bringing transparency to the process on what we are doing and not doing in a specific product. So if you think about it, a lot of times we'll see products go through and you might be surprised that maybe your product is ready for release, or that it meets certain exceptions that maybe you would have done differently, or you would have said, no, we really need to do that. We have those. I think everybody has those. But how you react and how you capture those is something I found is very unique. I want to share that. So a tactic that I have seen very successful is reviews. Reviews with the engineers, having cybersecurity, being on the calls, on the sprint plannings, on the blocker calls, the stand-ups. Like we're on these calls, right? Our teams around the world are on these calls, listening and contributing. And if there's something that comes up, we add it to a ticket. So we do a lot of reviewing and a lot of sharing of what we're seeing, but not only the specific, right? Oh, well, you can't use that encryption, but more of the, have you thought of this? How do we handle this situation? And sometimes it is literally like, hey, how do we handle approval of a hardware device in the field where we have field service technicians that are third parties working on this? And you go through these user stories with the engineers to try to hack and solve what is the best to get you to the answer. So review. We also do a lot of approvals, right? And we do these through tickets, and we try to be very trackable in these because we want everybody to be involved in it, um, and we want to be able to come back to it because if you identify something that we could do differently and you make it better, or you don't, and you say, well, we have to have an exception, the risk doesn't exist in this version of this product. And while we have a control that we really want to have, we understand we're going to be okay without it because we're human and we can review the risk together as a team. But we do use this trackability. This is super important because product code bases get reused and then or they get upgraded or they come into or they get merged into another. And the risk profile and the decision path that the engineers and cybersecurity made as a team, now some of those core considerations might change. And so by creating these tickets, by keeping the engineers a part of this process, we have found that that transparency allows for better follow through. Now, we all know that in cybersecurity, we learn new things, right? We might learn that that was a really bad piece of code, and we all didn't know that for a decade, or whatnot. So we do also a process where we look back, where we say, okay, this was what came up. How does this really play given the new environment or this new information? And so I think it's super interesting to see kind of how that plays out. It's proven very positive for us. We have made improvements. We found things where we could do better, and we made them better, and we've woven those into for the benefit of our customer. So when I think about that whole process, I find it to be really unique. So to kind of recap here, architects are involved throughout the whole process. You identify considerations around security or privacy, things you might want to change. And there are also benefits and features, right? Are we going to have a red light or a blue light, right? Like those questions are real and they're part of this product process. We approve those with not just the product security leaders, with the architects. If it's a real decision that it's not really where we think it might belong, then we involve the CTOs and they approve it, right? Because they care, because they're part of the process. These are their babies and their teams are making it. And so when we report internally by project, by sprint, CTOs have full transparency. And then we report up to this senior executive leadership level on exactly what else we have going on. And so it's super interesting to kind of really see how everything is being done together and that transparency, but also that process. And it brings everybody together. Nobody's suddenly surprised when we're working on something. And the context matters, right? Even at our seniors executive level, they care how our customers are experiencing the products. And they want to be informed where we're proactive, where we've had to make exceptions around the business, and what are our actions going to be forward from there. That helps them in every engagement, in every part of divining the strategy. And what's interesting here is that because we have that full transparency and that reporting up process, it creates a lot of a follow through and ownership across all the executives. So that's been super good for us. So the track, ticket, and improve cycle, very valuable. I've seen it other organizations and other product teams where we use different ticketing systems. Honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what ticketing system you use. It matters that you, the cybersecurity professionals, are involved in it. The executives have access or at least getting dashboard reviews and real data, right? Your metrics have to be right. Too many times I see people saying, hey, we've got just X vulnerabilities or just highs or here's the closure rate. And they lose the context. Like how many are compliant? What defines compliant? Is it just the risk register and the controls that you defined as the ledger? Or is it that with a layer of intelligence on top about, is it a connected product? Is it an offline product? Is it hardware? and where are those exceptions, right? Because you can have something that doesn't have a security control that was approved for an exception that is compliant, right? Because it's compliant because it meets the standard. So really making sure that the metrics we have flow, making sure we're really communicating what are those exceptions maybe that we've done, ticket them and include them, because long term, as I said, as projects merge and evolve, we might make different decisions as a team. And we have found that to be pretty a sound process. Coverage. I can't speak enough to this. So in every organization I've worked on the product space, we always focus on coverage, meaning what do you care about and what is the percentage that it is applying to your scope of products. Now, when you're in the cloud, you can have hundreds of subscriptions, thousands and thousands of different endpoint resources, functions, whatever you have. And we're a very large user of cloud service providers and technology. Knowing you can say, I have 100% of this product or our services or our resources meeting, specific criteria, it changes the game. It is not easy. It is one of the hardest things I have seen in my evolution from working in the clouds at Cisco and Google and da-da-da-da-da. It is the biggest game changer. And it's one of the hardest things, right? Because you can measure quality, but what's the percentage of the coverage? You can have great testing methods, but if you're not testing the right elements, the right scope, the right population, it doesn't matter, right? You can have the best tests, but if you only test one thing a year because your red team can only handle it, it's not going to give you the results that you need. So coverage in one, what are the project coverage rate that we're participating in? Coverage in alignment to the standard, coverage in where exceptions are captured, coverage where we have collected and are running automation scripts in the cloud against our subscriptions in order to determine, our current state and maybe where we need to pay a lot of attention to. So those are really big things that I really like to focus on and I see as really kind of game changers. Obviously, every organization, we're always learning, right? Like we have lots of things that we're learning. We see things every day that we're trying to improve. Our community is the core to the success, both internally and externally, right? We are really blessed to work with researchers, work with different government entities, and just peers. And that's why this kind of discussion, sharing this information is so valuable because it allows it. A couple key areas to recap. One, we want to make sure cybersecurity at the technical and at the top level of our business is embedded throughout the process, especially at the design stage, right? Like there are points of no return in certain development cycles where we cannot make changes, right? And so if we're not early enough and we haven't laid the foundation of this is how you can do all these things, then we miss. We, as cybersecurity professionals, have to clearly inform and make available the methods and the kind of the bumpers that allow them to develop with the freedom of not binding people to platform and specifics, right? So an example, my favorite example, is we should not say have a antivirus agent installed. And if you don't have it installed, then you're not compliant and can't ship your product. Because what if it's an IoT device? What if it's a cloud service? What if it is a virtual machine that we rebuild every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes? We have to be smart as a cybersecurity community to roll back and examine why we asked people to do that tactic. An antivirus component is a tactic to address the risk of, of an attack, of an infection, of malicious code. Now, obviously, the antivirus tool sets today are very fat in what they do. And so we have to be mindful of that. Simply by deploying that one tactic in your virtual machines can cost you $1 million a year in CPU utilization if you're not careful. So you got to be super smart in that we want to always review what is the intent of the risk that we're trying to mitigate, and then how do we do that for our product and what our teams are looking for to do. Have a program. So we have something called NPI NPE, and it's literally software development lifecycle. It governs everything. It links everything from how to sourcing, vet vendors. What can we do better there? We redirect people there. How do we go through the development lifecycle with our products? What type of tactics and tools are we using? How do you access them? What are the phase gates? What are the approvals, the deliverables that have to go through? Who approves it, right? We've got big review meetings on it. So if we're going to change anything, we make sure everybody's agreeing to it. We include the developers in this process. So yeah, so have that program in place. Ideally, you can map it to a standard that then becomes your reference architecture. As it evolves, you can reflect against it. Makes it really easy for certification and accreditation long term if you have those kind of backbones in your program. Spoke about it, but culture caring with our engineers, right? Like our engineers honestly will YouTube how to do certain things to make their products better, right? And so we just really encourage the self-development. We create a lot of training videos, a lot of published materials. We do a lot of training sessions with some great partners in our vendor community. And I really encourage that, right? Like drive them to the best. And if you have found, hey, this is how you secure Azure, this is what you do for this particular two-factor authentication tip, publish it, like post it to your wikis, put it in Slack. Having the right level of involvement through all of the development lifecycle and all the staging gates is huge. CTO visibility will really help broadly. And then I think also one of the key scenarios is in anything that's going to have sensitivity, anything that's going to really, if it comes up in the higher risk quadrant for your business, right? So maybe it is, whatever, nuclear materials, or it's video cameras for, adolescents, right? Like it's an area that puts lives at danger. For those types of things, we really prescribe heavy red team, deep testing of those products, where the point where you actually break it down, really get into it, and really do our best to really kind of identify what's happening and what's possible. We do proactively look at kind of where is everything going, and we do that in a manner to say, where is this product going, and what are the potentials that can come from there. So IoT, right? Like we have a lot of devices deployed. So we really think about the attacks that can happen on them. Obviously, we're really learning a lot. There's a lot of creativeness happening here. But again, we go back to the base, control register. We really think about these connected. And because it's connected, it has some of our most severe product requirements. Even if it's a dumb sensor, we really do focus deeply on it and do our best there. So other things I think we should focus on in the next few years for our products, and hopefully you'll be able to take it away. Some things that we're seeing some great lift is supply chain, hardware, software, partnerships in the market, really focusing on less isolation and more collaboration, and aiming away from the classic of we're just going to send 300 question workbooks to companies to fill out and call that security, but instead put together a method so that we can engage with our suppliers, share practices, level up their tech and their hardware and their response process and their updates. And if how do we handle something that's not great? Like, what if we find something, we need to fix it? So really working with them to pull together that level of detail and that practical maturity in their organization is something we're really looking towards, and I think that's going to be a big differentiator. Abstraction of services, so really refactoring of code and the product stacks, and really finding where your product team is. So as we look at moving, shifting from taking a data center and then pushing it to the cloud and then refactoring it into, you know, PaaS and SaaS, and then going full, kind of Lambda function, process, the landscape changes, the risks change, right? So we as practitioners really need to make sure that we are reapplying and revisiting some of the old assumptions. So we're really focused on that. I mean, the growth of the product, cybersecurity standards and the practices across sectors, right? So not staying in your swim lane. So a lot of people say, well, we are an industrial nuclear company, so we're only going to focus on this standard. That's okay, but what about everything else, especially if you're moving into different spaces? Just be real mindful of the register and security program you're using, and audit it to see if it really is giving you the scope of coverage that makes sense, right? So if you started moving into the cloud, but your architecture and your security standards don't even have a concept of that, then we really need to reassess what we're doing and how we're leveling it against it. And of course, elemental level security, right? Like, let's be real focused in basics about it and kind of see where we are there and what we can do differently. So the end intent here is there is a lot of things we can do very practically where cybersecurity is embedded, making improvements, kind of seeing those different functions. There is a lot of ways we can really be a problem for our products and not giving value to our customers. And I would really challenge everyone to focus on that, giving value and really trying to connect into those pieces. Avoid the shiny objects, right? As fun as it is to talk about cyber warfare tools and crypto jacking attacks and coin miners and yada yada, right? Get your basics right, integrate with your product teams, bring them those new insights on considerations, and then you will be in a much better position in the market, and you'll build an army of passionate cybersecurity professionals in your organization. And I wish that for everyone. So this is a sneak peek on my 2019 RSA presentation. Going to keep adding content, references, details. So if you join the presentation, you're going to see a lot of very detailed information. Also, I am writing detailed articles on every one of these parts, not just to share. I'm also doing it to really make sure I'm distilling down and really reacting to see what are the comments and the feedback that I get around each piece. So that way, when I'm at the presentation, I'm going to really dive into those categories and articles and depth of content that was really resonating and was giving the most value. So obviously, love the feedback. If you're seeing this after the presentation, you'll always be able to kind of pull those articles. Just Google them. They're all there. And just wish you well and welcome all of the advice on this journey, knowing that this is a journey, right? And we're not really going to ever be perfect. And we're going to keep trying our best to give value, do our best for our customers, and really just partner. So if you can do that with your teams, with your leadership, set the right strategy, set the culture, and everything becomes much better. So strategy and culture, that's my focus. That's what I love. And I'm really happy to see the transformation around the cybersecurity in the product world, and excited to see what you do with it. So thank you.